Welcome to another episode of Keeping It Realty with Brian and Mark. I'm Mark.
I'm Brian.
And today, before we get started, I do want to give a shout out to East Brother Beer Company. Today we're going to try their Gold IPA, which is my number 2 favorite beer from East Brother Beer. My number 1 favorite is their new Baltic Porter. That was so amazingly good.
Well, then this is time for the Brian taste test because I actually have never tasted this particular flavor yet.
Well,
I'll
let's
give you
taste
my
it.
candid opinion right now.
It's good. It's a classic IPA. I
really
love
like
IPAs.
it. I really like it. It's got a great, smooth taste, actually. Really, I enjoy that.
Yeah, so definitely go check out East Brother Beer Company. They're located in Point Richmond of Richmond, California. Very cool warehouse. Love their beer. Great guys that own it.
Great water
lots of fun.
views.
Yep.
And a great social environment. Just really cool place to be.
Exactly. So let's jump right into the very first topic here. Very first topic is housing and the next recession. So we all know what happened in 2008 with the big financial crash. And so there's talk about another recession coming up in 2020. So Brian, I'm going to let you kick it off first. What's your opinion? Are we going to see a 2020 recession?
Personally, I do believe we are kind of heading in that direction just because if you follow the cyclical trends of real estate for several years, it's not seasonal. A lot of times people will make the mistake that, things slow down during winter and speed up during summer, but it's actually very cyclical. California real estate in particular goes in these 5, 6, 7-year cycles where they start out from the bottom and start climbing back up. So if you look back from that, the last time we came out of a recession, which was right around 2012, and we were in a 4-year major recession, they call it the Great Recession, starting right around 2007 to 2008, when the FDIC shut down upwards of 3,500 banks, 2,000 of which they shut down, and I think in starting in the year 2007.
There was one day where like 200 got shut down in one day.
Yeah, they just went through all these issues, and that started off the tightening of credit, and then of course making it more difficult to buy a home, and then prices drop, and then primarily a lot of foreclosures, which in turn created a huge supply in the market. And
so the question though is, are we going to see this recession happen again in 2020?
I don't believe that it will be that big. And again, I'm just kind of speaking from experience. Those types of recessions happen every 20 years, right? But if you follow when we come out of a recession, so, we were in that recessionary period from 2007 to 2012, and then you start going 5, 6, 7 years from 2012 from the real estate values kind of hitting the bottom after they had hit the top in 2007, then you find ourselves in 2018. And right about May of 2018, I personally started to see a reduction in the prices that people were offering, despite the fact that properties were still receiving multiple offers.
Well, the one thing to keep in mind is that last year, 2018, is the very first time that the housing market has ever decoupled from the actual economy.
Yes. And so what Mark's bringing up there is that typically when recessions occur, it's because you have massive job layoffs. And so, of course, people have less money to buy a house, and then there's more inventory. But last year, the Bay Area job market, the U.S. job market was still very, very good, with the Bay Area job market being as low as 3% in many areas. And what that means is that employers are chasing employees. It was to the extent where we were importing plumbers, electricians, other tradespeople out of state, paying them double or triple, which we kind of talked about in prior episodes, just to feed the economy. But even though people were prosperous and doing well with jobs, they just weren't making those above asking price offers. We won't really know the reason why until after you've kind of come out of the recession. But it's one of those things where empirically you can't exactly know the real reason just yet. But right about that time, something always tends to slow the market down. Although I think this one will probably be an 18-month to 24-month recession, and then you'll start to see it climb back up again.
One of the things that I'm very interested in watching is the unemployment rate. Unemployment rate is super, super low. However, you have to dive into it a little bit more, because if one person has one job, that creates stability, that creates security. However, if someone has 2 or 3 jobs, to make up full-time pay, that's not the same as one job, right? And so I think what's going to be very interesting to see is when the next recession hits, how many part-time jobs are going to be lost and how many people that are working multiple jobs are going to lose all of their jobs. We might see a big spike in unemployment when that actually happens. Now, on the flip side, the one thing that is also very interesting to track is the number of baby boomers that are going to be retiring. And I think it's estimated between Canada and the US, 11,000 baby boomers will be retiring every single day for the next 4 years.
Oh, that's quite an amazing figure.
Right? And so what could potentially happen, and this is going to be very interesting to see, is a labor shortage when it comes to the workforce. So workforce labor shortage. So if that happens, it may not be as bad. I mean, right now we're hearing news of people laying off. PepsiCo just announced that they're going to spend $1.75 billion in the next 4 years in severance packages because they're going to be laying people off to focus on automation.
Wow, that's interesting. Well, I mean, that segues into multiple other things. The fact that the recessions and the job market or even the real estate market and values are not tied to one single factor. There's so many various factors hitting us at various times now. And each time we go into a recession, it's always very different. I mean, but the first time I experienced a recession, a big one, like in 2008, was from 1991 to about 1995, 1996, when there was massive job layoffs, primarily in the aerospace industries and things like that. But those people were eventually repositioned into the tech jobs that we now see today. Yeah. Which again, that's another story for another time. But again, that's just my personal prediction. It won't be as large as the one we all came out of. And one thing you got to always remember about California real estate is that when it hits these peaks and it begins to come back down, it never goes back down to the very beginning where it started at. Case in point, you don't see houses for $40,000 anymore. But even though that same house might be worth $700,000 now and have dropped previously from a price of $750,000, it originally started at a price point way back in the late '70s for $40,000.
Okay, so real quick, Sam, we're gonna get another timer for the end of the timer for Brian here.
Sorry.
So spring buying. Many people know that spring and summertime are the most ideal times to actually buy a home. So the question comes down to, what's the market outlook for 2019? Is spring for 2019 going to be the time to buy a home? And personally, I think it depends on how long you're going to hold on to the property. I think historically, if you look at people who have bought properties over a 15, 20, 25-year period, if you're holding the property during that time, for the most part, you're going to be okay. Property values are going to continue to go up. The value of the dollar goes up. You could buy more with it. I mean, there's values just go up over time, but it is a long-term hold. Where people get really caught up is, well, if I buy now, am I going to be profitable or am I going to have equity in the next 3, 4, 5 years? And now you're playing the timing game and you're going to have losers. You're going to have winners. We saw the people that bought in 2004 and 2005 that all of a sudden 4 or 5 years later, they had nothing. They had no equity, foreclosed, short sales, a lot of issues. But if you bought in 2012 and now it's 2019, you're really well off.
Well, to kind of segue off what Mark was saying, timing is everything. However, what I always tell my clients is, provided that you're in a position where you can hold on to or pay the mortgage and it's very close to your rent, and there's a pretty simple calculation you could do to determine whether it's better to rent or to buy, then you should just hold on to the home. Remember, a lot of times people can get depressed over the fact that the value of their home has gone down. However, if they don't have to sell due to a job layoff or a forced relocation, then hold on to the property because, as Mark said, it's going to go back up, right? Kind of segues off of what I mentioned earlier with where houses started in the 1970s, where they went to in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, and now we're in 2019, and they go these upward and down patterns. So provided you can hold on to it, if the values are down, don't worry, just hold on for 2, 3, 4 years, and you'll probably back up in that up cycle again. I had that exact conversation over lunch with one of my clients that invests with me. He bought a home. He went to go check the value for an equity line because he wanted to invest additional funds elsewhere. and he noticed that the property had gone down about $10,000. Well, he bought the home cash. It didn't really matter that it went down $10,000. That was a simple function of what his prior neighbor had sold it for a month later. He's not in a position where he has to sell the property. He intended to be there for a long time. So if he does ever want to sell it, he would literally, in my opinion, wait 3-4 years, which is not that long a hold, right? When you look at the overall spectrum of things, especially when you compare it to stocks. And so again, if you can afford the payment, you're not stretched to the bone, because this is exactly what happened when people lost their homes in the late 2007, 2008. They used their homes like credit cards. They pulled out every bit of equity to buy stupid stuff like boats or
Well, remember,
things.
there were a lot of homes that were being sold with Mercedes-Benz parked in the garages.
Yeah, and so this again, we touched on that in the prior episode about the mortgage meltdown and things of that nature. And so long as you're smart about your home and you use it as a home and not a personal credit card, just tapping all of the equity, you're gonna be able to ride those ups and downs. And at the end of the day, you don't care because it would be an unrealized loss. Just like people saying, oh, my stock is worth so much or my house is worth so much. Well, if you didn't sell it when it was high, it's going to be an unrealized gain.
And if you're looking to buy a property and you think you're going to be selling in the next 3, 4, 5 years, you may really want to consider maybe holding off or even renting to give you that flexibility if you believe there's a looming recession coming that could affect the housing market. That's something to really think about, because if you buy a home now in 2019 and all of a sudden you have no equity or you're underwater in the next 2-3 years and you have to sell the property to then relocate for work or any other reason, now you have a bit of a problem and you're faced with either doing a short sale or you're going to end up renting the property. However, depending on the rental market, you may be forking out negative cash flow every single month out of your pocket. Now, there are some benefits to that and some tax, of course, it's tax write-offs, that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, that's something that you're going to want to run some numbers on and kind of figure out if you're willing to take that risk. Now, again, if you're going to hold on to the property 15, 20 years, for most part, you're going to be okay.
Yeah, I think you'll be more than okay.
Yeah. Now, what I do want to see is a shift in trends from single-family homes to even buying multi-family buildings or even townhomes. I feel like more people are going to, they're looking more for like that urban, where they can walk to like the grocery store, coffee shops, that sort of thing. And so I really want to see that trend.
Well, isn't the next topic that we're going to touch on rise of townhomes and multi-unit buildings?
Actually, no, it's not.
No. Okay.
No, next topic, we're going to give people a little short. It's going to tie into a little bit of what we talked about. Basically, what if AIG didn't get bailed out in 2008? What would have happened? So basically, to give a little brief background on 2008, this financial crash, and you're going to hear a lot of us talk about it because we do get a lot of questions regarding the 2008 financial crash. We hear it all the time with clients. One of the concerns is, what if that's going to happen again? And then we get into this conversation of, the short answer is no, it's not going to happen again. It's going to be a different type of recession. It's not going to be as extreme as 2008. What happened in 2008?
Actually, more specifically, it won't happen again for the reasons that it happened in 2008, which we'll clarify on a little bit more.
Yeah, so basically in 2008, bank lenders were making all kinds of bad loans, subprime loans, subprime mortgages. I think they went down as low as 540 credit score on some loan packages. It was something crazy ridiculous. As long as you had a pulse, you could get a loan. In fact, one journalist made a point. He actually got a loan for his dog.
Well, see, and now let's take a step back. Lenders during that period of time were making bad loans. They had lowered their lending guidelines. And the primary reason they were doing this was because of mortgage insurance. Loans had, what you have to understand about the subprime market is that it primarily focused on low money down payments, 0% down, no income, no verification, that type of thing, right?
These were crap loans that they then turned around and had to sell out to investors, but no investor wanted these crap loans.
But they made these loans because of mortgage insurance. whenever you put less than 20% down, you're going to be required to have mortgage insurance. And that essentially ensures that that loan that was made by a bank will be paid back by, say, a government agency like FHA or Veterans Affairs, or even private mortgage insurance, something that's not tied to the government. Way back in the 1920s, during the recessionary period, back when banks would only do loans for 50% of the value, they had a great idea, and they came up with mortgage insurance, right? This is where these government agencies came up, that like FHA or VA, and what they basically said is, hey, I got a novel idea. Why don't you finance 90% of this property? And the bank would say, well, why would I do that? Because I'm going to insure you that in case that person defaults, then I'll pay you back. And so this goes back into what would have happened with AIG. Remember, AIG was a big insurance company, and they insured many of these loans. And these lenders got a little bit laxed with this because, they have all these different insurances. And in fact, insurance companies made bets against insurance companies saying that I'll insure you if this loan goes bad. And it became one big circle.
And AIG just happened to be the biggest company,
holding the bag that was supposed to pay off the loans for all these loans that had gone bad to people who had no intention really of paying them back, because they never had any idea or responsibility to what was involved in doing this. It's a whole nother topic, just bad loans, bad loans primarily to people who had no intention of paying them back.
Yeah, so basically in order to sell, so maybe you've heard of securitization or collateralized debt obligation. So basically, many of these bad loans were packaged with other securities, other types of investments sold off. Now, smart investors, again, they're not going to buy bad products, bad investment products. However, if there's insurance tied into it, all of a sudden that adds a certain level of surety that you're not going to lose so much money if loans go bad. And everything just happened to hit at once, which ended up affecting the entire United States, the global markets, and you had one giant big recession. Now, bailouts. Were the bailouts necessary for the banks?
Well, again, in my opinion, the bailouts were necessary for the banks. You're going to probably, most of the time, most public opinion would be that they should have let all the banks burn and, kind of go under. And now, had that happened, that would have been catastrophic for the economy. Remember, although the primary focus of these of this recession was the housing market, banks, had they been allowed to go under, they made loans not only on houses, but businesses, the SBA, not retailers, but manufacturers making products, and who employed many people.
And everyday type of loans like credit cards, car loans.
Credit cards, yeah.
Yeah.
And so that would have created a big circular effect of what our economy, what our economy is based on is I buy from you, you buy from me, and this money is constantly circulating. In exchange, and a profit's being generated. That would have all come to a big screeching halt, essentially. It would have been catastrophic for the economy, and a lot of the systems that were in place would have, many other systems in place would have been shut down.
It's something that we're not going to see again, because after that recession, there was a lot of overcorrection. And a lot of those bad loans just simply weren't made. So we're not going to see that again. Okay, next topic, improving properties. We get this question quite a bit. How do you improve properties? So Brian, being that he does commercial sales, is going to give you basically a perspective on how to improve properties, commercial properties, and really to get them ready for sale and extract extra value out of them. And what I want to do is really, I deal with property management. So from the management perspective, how do we fix up rental units in order to get more value? So Brian, I'll let you start first.
Well, if I'm segueing off of talking about bringing value for houses, right? I'm primarily single family houses, not necessarily investments or apartments. Then many times I'm going to go to I can run numbers all day long, and I can run evaluations all day long. But at the end of the day, the valuations on houses are going to be driven by people's emotion and what the latest trends are, whether they're nice, cool brass or silver handles on kitchen drawers, or the latest tiles for bathrooms, or the latest countertops. These are various things that all bring appeal. And so many of the times whenever I'm selling a house and I'm trying to talk to the owner about getting the most value, I'm always going to encourage the bringing in an interior decorator or a stager that's going to be able to bring out and highlight the functionality of the house to the average consumer, which is many days consumers these days for houses are going to be very, very educated as to what they're looking for, and they will have probably looked at many different properties, and so they'll have a lot of things to compare from. And of course, the newer the things are, as far as appliances or amenities like kitchen countertops, the more it draws attention to the eye, and of course sparks off the emotion. And a lot of times this will ensue bidding wars on properties or people offering more for the property because it hits those specific functionality points and aesthetics that the buyer is looking for.
Now, for a rental property, it's a little bit different because you have to look at what you could rent the property for with a quick, simple turnover, just as is. So basically, as long as there's no habitability issues, simple paint job, cleaning, get it up on the market. What can you rent the property for? Let's say you can get $1,700 for it. But let's say you invest a little bit of capital into it. Maybe you replace the flooring, replace the kitchen, redo the bathroom, maybe upgrade the windows. Now you might be looking at $2,000, $2,100, $2,200. And so the cost of improving the property in turn will get you higher rents. But then it becomes a question of how much do you want to spend in order to get a decent return on that investment capital. And so those are certain things that we look at when we're going to turn over a residential unit. So just to be very general here, some of the improvements you can do to your rental apartments right now that seem to get the most return on your investment really comes down to high grade flooring. So we're talking about tile flooring in the kitchen, bathrooms. What's the interesting trend I'm seeing is how many tenants are really trying to stay away from carpeted rentals and go into laminate wood flooring rentals, because historically tenants have always battled with property owners who charge them for carpet replacement when the carpet's maybe 2 years old, can get by with a shampoo, and doesn't really warrant carpet replacement. So because of that, many tenants are really focusing on very low maintenance, low turnover flooring. So that would be either tile flooring or laminate wood flooring. Now, if you go laminate wood, I don't recommend to go with the cheap stuff. Go with the high-end stuff. You have, my favorite brand is Pergo Outlast at Home Depot. It's $2.80 a square foot, and it has an underlayment already built into it. And I think it's perfect. It's waterproof, and it's going to last you 10 to 15 years through many tenant turnovers. So there's that. A very cheap, unique way we raise a little bit of value is by doing custom paint. So a lot of people like to do white paint, just do a simple white paint.
But two tones.
Yeah. So we'll go through and we'll do a custom paint, give it a nice warm earthy, cozy feel to it. But then we'll do an accent wall. And we'll do like a dark gray accent wall with maybe a very light blue silver main wall. And that just adds a lot of class and modernness. Is modernness even a word? Modernism adds a lot of modern look and feel to the actual apartment. So I think between the high grade Pergo Outlast, some custom paint, and an accent wall, I think those two simple repairs are bringing in some really high rents.
No, I agree. In fact, we were having this exact discussion with a landlord and what kind of upgrades they should do to the unit just yesterday in a unit in Albany that they were trying to rent out.
Okay, so the property we're going to analyze.
So today, we've always in the prior episodes we've always analyzed properties that I thought were good. Well, today I thought I'd analyze a property that I thought was not a good investment and the reasons why. And again, this is a 4-unit building in the city of Richmond that we're going to look at today. And
now, real quick, while you're pulling that up, remember in the city of Richmond, you have to have a business license. You have to register with the fire department for the fire inspection program. There's also a rental residential inspection program. And there's also the newly created from 2016 rent board. Control. The rent control board, which is right now $207 per unit. So That's 207 per unit. You've got the residential inspection, which I believe is 150 plus 75 per unit. You've got the fire department, which is 115 a unit, and a business license 238, and that's what you're paying per year.
And in fact, just taking it from my perspective of Richmond, when I first started investing in Richmond, like 20 plus years ago, in the late 90s, 97, 98, 99, it was a gold mine. It was a great opportunity to be able to invest there. There wasn't rent control, and there was a lot of opportunity. The prices were relatively low, with the rents being at not only being able to support the property's debt with as little as 10% down, but there was a lot of room for growth because the rents were below market. Not to mention at the time, people were very skittish about Richmond, and so it commanded a much higher cap rate. You always hear me talk about cap rate. Again, cap rate is the return you would make if you bought the property all cash. It's one of the few denominators that investors will look at to determine if it's a good property or not. And again, when you're looking at a cap rate, nowadays you're wanting to start at somewhere around 5% cap to maybe 6% cap. The higher the cap, the lower the price, and the higher the cap usually perceives a greater amount of risk, right? So if I'm going to buy and make a return, this is what I would find to be acceptable for my money based upon the risk that I'm taking. So in particular, because of the reasons that Mark had brought up that have now taken place, such as rent control and the rent control board and the various restrictions that are very, very tenant friendly, but not landlord friendly. And there's no balance. So it makes it difficult to own real estate in Richmond. There are still reasons you can come into Richmond and make money. There are still value adds there. But in particular, this 4-unit building in Richmond, I thought was a bad investment. So we always talk about what would be a good investment. It's also important to look at what are things you should stay away from. So this 4-unit building in Richmond is asking $799,999, essentially $800,000. It's a configuration of a model that I've personally owned over the years, which is a 4-unit apartment building with 1 3-bedroom, 2-bath, and 3 2-bedroom, 1-bath, and enclosed 1-car garages. So the layout and the aesthetics are great. It's a nice looking building. It's not one of these hodgepodge buildings that wasn't essentially designed to be a 4-unit or an apartment and was kind of carved out throughout the years and turned into an apartment. This was built as an apartment. In fact, it was built in 1984. However, for the various reasons that Mark had brought out, it's no longer a good investment. So let's look at why. First of all, as I mentioned, cap rate's a first denominator that people look at as to why I should invest and whether it's a good investment or not. In essence, or in short, if I'm going to keep my money in the bank earning less than 1%, or put my money in the bank into a mutual fund maybe earning 3 or 4%, then if I'm going to put it into real estate, which is going to be quasi-passive, quasi-active, right, depending upon how you manage your property, then I need to make a higher return than 4 or 5, and I should be somewhere around 5, 5.5, or 6. And I should be in a position through regular rental increases to see my investment grow from a 5.5 to a 6.5, 7.5, 8.5% capitalization rate over the years that I hold it. Now, this building doesn't provide any of those things. Couple things as we go to first slide, you'll see the property's asking $800,000, and I did the typical standard 25% down payment just to see what type of return I would get. And again, when I'm using a down payment and I'm using leverage or debt, I'm going to now look at it from the return on investment or cash on cash return perspective. But just right off the bat, since I'm always talking about cap rate, at $799,000 with its current existing rents, minus a vacancy, minus the utilities, minus the management fee, minus the new taxes and bonds and assessments, minus a new insurance, you have a building that makes a 2.93% cap rate. So less than the 6% that or 5% even that you want to start out with. And the reason why what that essentially means is that if I bought the building for $800,000, and again, I don't have a debt, I'm just taking in the income, a vacancy factor, all of my expenses, I'm left with essentially $23,462 a year. Over a $800,000 investment is a 2.93% return on my money. That's really, really low, especially for an apartment, right? Now, if you look at the column next to it,
That's assuming no problems.
That's assuming no problems.
You have a tenant that doesn't pay rent, and now you're in a city like Richmond with just cause, and even though you have legal right to evict for non-payment of rent, it can still get very expensive. I mean, an eviction in Richmond will easily cost you $3,000 to $5,000, assuming no jury trial.
In several months.
Yeah, in several months. In jury trial, you'll be paying $5,000 per day to an attorney.
Yeah, now keep in mind, in my expense calculations, I do account for the possibility of legal fees, right? Now, here's the big value add for Richmond. Of course, there's the problem of rent control or the problem of getting here. The property, if it could rent for market, would the income would go from $4,397 essentially to $8,112.50, right? If each of the units were rented at the fair market rent should be. That essentially turns into like a 43% loss to lease, or the difference between what you're actually getting and what you should be getting. If you did get what you should be getting, then suddenly the property should be at a 7.95 cap. Now, in most cases, investors looking at an investment like that, could say, hey, this is not a bad investment because I can get in and I can eventually raise my rents to that amount, even if I just use the standard 8% to 10% a year that you would normally see, where you don't even fall into a rent gouging issue. However, as Mark has pointed out, you got Richmond's rent control, and that with 2.97 or 3% a year.
3.6 this year.
3.6 is the maximum you can raise those rents. So when I applied a 3% increase in rents to the current rent, then what you start to see is you climb from a 2.93 to a 3.11 to a 3.29 to a 3.48. So you're only at a 3.48 cap rate after 4, maybe 5 years. You're still below that 5 cap minimum or 5.5 cap minimum that you want to start with. And then as the market does slow down, you're going to start seeing, in fact, we have been seeing in our prior episode, we talked about properties that started at a 6 cap, right? Because you're beginning to see investors perceive more risk in the market, so they want to have a better return. And so the standard of what investors want to see, or the market cap, begins to climb and the values go down. In this particular property, you start out low, you stay low, and you don't really increase in value. You got that dangling carrot in front of you as far as what it could be worth, and this really high cap rate if you can get all the market rents. It's just that good luck getting there unless the tenants voluntarily move out. Mark could probably speak even more to the legalities of getting them out, or the buyouts that you would have to be able to offer them, because there's standard buyouts now in Richmond, to buy them out of their unit if you want to live in your unit, or you want to be able to make proper renovations and then get market rent for the unit.
Yeah, and now to do the proper renovations and then try to get a higher rent, there is a petition process to go through in Richmond. Excuse me. So there's a petition process to go through at Richmond, but they require a lot of documentation. You're in front of a rent board where they're already not favoring you because the rent board makeup is at least 3 tenants, 2 landlords. So that's the makeup of the rent board. And then they're also behind. My understanding right now is they're behind by 1 year in getting to those petitions. So it's going to be a long process anyway. And basically what it comes down to is, assuming there's no problems at the property, the return on this investment is not ideal. You could literally go to one city over. In fact, we have a client that did that. They bought in San Pablo, bought at like a 4.89 cap, but because of no rent control and because of the type of building, in a few years they're going to be at 6.8, 6.9% cap rate. Right. Much better investment property than this one. And in fact, that's one of the drawbacks to rent control and just cause ordinances that many cities are looking at considering and putting into place, because in El Cerrito right now is considering a rent control ordinance, is that this rent control restricts the value of many properties that could come back to the city in forms of taxes and many other things.
Well, segueing off what you said, if you valued this building based on its actual income, the value of the building should be like $391,000, not $800,000. And in fact, at the $800,000 price point with 25% down, you're actually not only going to have a small 2.93 3% cap rate to start, you're going to have a negative cash flow of $1,192 negative every month. In fact, you would be at what's called a 0.62 debt service coverage. It's a denominator that lenders will use to determine whether or not it's a sound loan to make, because if you're an investor, are you going to be making money? So what they'll typically want is a 1.2 debt service, with 1.0 being a break even, 1.2 meaning you're making 20% above what your proposed mortgage would be. And in this case, you're making you're making well below your proposed mortgage, and so it's reflected in actual negative cash flow to the tune of $11.92 a month to support the building.
So that's the time that we have for Keeping It Realty. So thank you again for watching. Hopefully we're bringing a lot of value. Please leave comments in the comment section below. Let us know what you like about the show. Let us know what you would like to see on the show. Reach out to us anytime. Our contact information is in the video and in the comments on our pages.
And if you want us to analyze a specific property for the show, or even just take a look at the property for you as a second opinion, feel free to reach out to us at the numbers and the emails that we've provided.
For sure. And big shout out again to East Brother Beer Company for being the show sponsor, providing the beer, and maybe we'll see some of you guys over there at East Brother Beer in Point Richmond. So thanks for watching.
Stay tuned for next time.